welcome to another episode of the Barley, Hops, and Yarn podcast. My name is Jennifer. I'm the face behind Barley, Hops, and Yarn. This is primarily a knitting podcast. Sometimes I show off things that I have dyed. Sometimes I do pattern review episodes, and that's what this episode is going to be. So if you see me looking down, it's because I have my notes written out because I don't want to forget anything. That was me setting down my coffee. But today we are going over the Evangeline Blouse, which is by Devin, who on Instagram is at Aggie_knits. And this, here she is, she being my pattern. So I don't have it on just because I need to pack it in a suitcase because I'm wearing it on the trip that we're going on and I don't feel like wearing it right now. But I will, of course, insert pictures so y'all can see what it looks like. Also, I can't easily back up, like I'm in the corner, so you can't really get a good feel for some of the things I'm going to talk about unless I hold it up to the camera. So, anyway, full body pictures. The pattern, so I knit this as a test knit. The pattern has since been released. That's my boyfriend in case anyone wants to see him. Anyway, so the pattern has been released. She has it on Ravelry. It is $9 on there, and on Instagram she is oftentimes running sales or promotions for other patterns that she has as well, so definitely give her a follow there. I was gonna say a lot, but all of her patterns that I have noticed have specifically meant to be maternity friendly, postpartum friendly, nursing and breastfeeding friendly, just body changing because of bodies changing friendly. So for this specific pattern, she has 10 sizes. The smallest size of the finished garment is a 59.5 inch bust. The largest size is a 95.5 inch bust. This pattern is meant to have almost 30 inches, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, around 30 inches of positive ease. So ultimately that's meant to fit about a 28 inch bust up to a 67-ish inch bust. Obviously with that much positive ease, you can play around with it as you see fit. Just know that the smallest garment size that you would possibly get would be already around a 60-inch bust. And then largest that you can get up to is a 95-ish inch if you wanted to have no ease at all. For my product, I mean, I guess it's technically a product. I made a size 7, so that's meant to fit between a 52 and 55 inch bust. My bust is 54-ish inches. I know how to speak. And my finished measurement for size 7 should be about 83.5 inches, but I only got like between 70 and 72. So clearly my gauge was off. I did do a gauge swatch because as much as I am anti-gauge swatch over here, for me personally, you guys do gauge swatches if you choose to. But this is part of why, because even though I did a gauge swatch, my final my final object always ends up being like really off of whatever my gauge swatch was. I don't really know why I can't seem to get that consistent, but whatever is what it is. I have said it before, I'll say it again. I'm happy to rip things out, and well, not happy. I don't love doing it, but I will rip things out if something's not working out the way I expect it to. So ultimately it is what it is. Needle size, it calls for using a US 4, which is 3.5 millimeter, and US 6, which is a 4 millimeter. Clearly I should have gone up in needle size since my gauge was off, but whatever. And sorry, I just got a text notification that made me laugh. The gauge itself is meant to be 19 by 21, so 19 stitches, 21 rows for a 4x4 inch swatch. I was super off on my row. My stitch gauge was 24 stitches per 4 inches. Sorry, I feel like my headphones are falling out. That's what I use for my microphone. So 24 stitches per 4 inches, and then 36 rows per 4 inches. I didn't block this as aggressively as I did for my mid-project block, which you guys may have seen in a previous episode. So when I did my final block, I didn't block it quite as aggressively. Next time I wash it, I'll probably try to be pretty aggressive with the blocking and see what I can get from it and see if I can lengthen that, lengthen the length and then lessen the row gauge. That phrasing makes sense, I think, but we'll see. Sorry, quick break so I could turn my notifications off since I kept getting distracted. But the yarn itself that this pattern calls for is 2 strands of lace held together or 1 strand of sport. I actually ended up using 1 strand of fingering and 1 strand of lace held together because that's what matched my gauge, except that didn't match my gauge when I did my swatch, but whatever. I had the fingering in stash already, so it wasn't an acquisition I needed to obtain because I already had it. The final object looks really pretty, and I do like the fabric that came out of it, so we're good. My fingering weight yarn was Madeline Tosh Merino Light. It is 100% superwash merino, and I did the colorway Frontier Lights. That is 107 grams, and it is 421 yards. I used just under 3 skeins. I used about 2.73 skeins. Which ended up being 292 grams and 1,149 yards. This specific yarn, if you buy it directly from Mad Tosh, which I believe is now owned by private equity, so that's a whole other conversation. If I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong. I'd love to know that. But the yarn is $32 for full price, so 32 times 3 would be $96 for that yarn specifically. And my other yarn was a lace weight. It was a Surrey silk blend from Yarn Jam on their Surrey Halo base. Colorway was Seafoam. That yarn was 50 gram skeins and 459 yards per each. I used 96 grams. So I used almost every scrap that I had, and that totaled out to 881.28 yards. That yarn specifically cost $31 per skein, so getting 2 of those, I did my math wrong, which is ridiculous, but 2 of those was $62. So my total yarn cost was $109, because backtracking a little bit to the Madeline Tosh, my local yarn store, my previous local yarn store was closing down, so had a lot of their yarns on sale. They got, so I was able to buy the Madeline Tosh yarn at half price. So I spent about $48 on a total, which then brings me to $109 for my yarn cost. Had I purchased that yarn for full price, it would have been about $158. And I did a little bit of math and a little bit of looking while I was taking my notes, and it looks like if I had simply done the Surrey silk blend, or a Surrey silk blend of some sort held double as opposed to doing the fingering weight in there as well, then I would have spent around the same amount. Now, this project specifically, and her recommended yarn on the pattern is plain material Monday base, which is a brushed silk. It is, I believe, from Italy, so, you know, importing and all of that. That one is $24 per skein. All of their skeins are 25 grams and 229 yards per. Backtracking a little bit, I used a total of, 2,030 yards. And the project itself expected that if you use, or the estimated yardage, if you use lace held double, is 2,135. If you use a sport weight, it's 1,065, specifically for size 7. So if we go back to my yardage of 2,030, then I would have had to buy 10 balls of the plain material Monday base. So that would have been $240 total in yarn. So obviously there's no requirement to use the specific yarn brand that is recommended in a pattern, but if you do, this is going to be a pricier one. And then also with your yarn selection, that brings up a question of, is it realistic to be knitting a top that if you're knitting this for the purpose of being able to breastfeed in it, is it realistic to knit a top that you're breastfeeding in that is made of silk or suri or non-superwash wool, or honestly even superwash wool, because while it's a little bit more durable with like throwing it in the laundry and everything, you still want to be careful with it. When you have a baby that spits up often because it's a baby and their GI tract is not a fully functioning GI tract yet. So, you know, that is a question that you will have to ask yourself when you are choosing your yarns. My baby is now 5 months old, so he doesn't spit up quite as much. He still does, but he doesn't spit up quite as much, so comfortable doing the more luxury yarn, so to speak. I don't mind that I would have to hand wash this. But if this were in the earlier days of breastfeeding, when he was spitting up a ton, especially because, you know, TMI, y'all don't need to know this, but I'm telling you anyway, he has a milk intolerance right now, so I can't eat any dairy, which we didn't know at first. So he was spitting up a lot when he was first born because I was still eating dairy. So, you know, would I have wanted to wear this specifically for breastfeeding while we were in the heavily spitting up stage? Probably not, because when you have a newborn, you don't have the capacity to be hand washing things. Anyway, so that's just some food for thought. But those are just some components to think about when you're choosing your yarn and what you'd like to do. Ease of washability when you're dealing with a newborn. So the construction of this is pretty, it's a drop shoulder. There's not really a shoulder at all for the most part, actually. I mean, there's a shoulder, but there aren't sleeves. Anyway, getting ahead of myself. The construction is pretty standard for a top of this type. You have your back panel, then you're going to pick up your stitches so you can do your front, left, and right panels, and then you'll join to do the body. And then for this specific project, you are going to pick up along the sides to do your lace panels, and then your bind off for the lace panel is a picot bind off. You can see a little bit better there. It's a picot bind off, and then when you get to like the body part, you're gonna, it's not technically seaming, but you're gonna sew it together to make it be, you know, an actual shirt with an armhole. One thing that I did not think about when I was binding off, when I was doing my last stitch on the picot bind off, is that if I was smart and thinking ahead, I could have left a really long tail and used that to sew up the side, which I did not do. So that gave me 2 more ends to weave in, which is annoying. But that would be my tip to you if you make this, is to make sure you leave a long tail on your bind off of the edging so that you can use the tail to then sew up your sides. You have on this back panel, again, my headphones feel like they're falling out. On this back panel, to get the shaping down, you're gonna have a lot of short rows. So be prepared, especially if you're knitting this with a baby, be prepared to know that unless you're somebody that can set your project down mid short row, which I am not, you're gonna have to be able to dedicate a chunk of time to get this project started without having interruptions before you're able to like easily set it down and pick it back up again. And then obviously having the short rows is gonna help with the fit. It's gonna help with the back panel being a back panel. It's so large that like I can't not cover my face. Like it's hard to get it in frame. Anyway, so back to the fit and the ease. I did get, like I said, I got 10 inches less of positive ease, which I actually don't mind because it already has 20 inches of positive ease, even with having the less. And I feel like for me, had I gotten the full 30 inches, I would have felt like the top was a little bit too baggy and too oversized. I feel like having the 20 inches is a good amount. It still works well for breastfeeding. It still works to wear over other things. Still leaves room for my body to change for any potential subsequent pregnancies or as changes just happen with your body while aging and things like that. I can't tell you how it actually would have fit while I was pregnant because I was not pregnant while I made this. I was already postpartum. But knowing my rib cage measurements, because the top comes kind of, you know, to the top-ish of your rib cage, I'd say a little bit lower, but top-ish of your rib cage, Right now it's about 46 inches circumference wise. And while I was pregnant, if I had to guess, it was probably about 52. I know that I carried a little bit lower. So I don't think the top of my rib cage, other than like expanding to make room for my organs and my growing uterus, I don't think it did that much. Anyway, so I still had, even with that, I'm pretty sure I still had a ton of positive ease while being pregnant, had I been wearing this while being pregnant. I personally would have preferred to make it a little bit longer than I did actually make it, but that would have required buying another skein of the Surrey Silk Blend, which I didn't want to do because, again, I already spent $31 per skein on it. I didn't want to have to spend more. And I also appreciate that I did end up using almost every single gram of the Surrey Silk Blend, because I don't like having leftovers specifically of like a Surrey Silk or a mohair or something like that, because what am I going to use a couple of grams of that in? Not really anything. And then the pattern itself, to get into that a little bit, the pattern itself is very clearly written. It's visually pleasing to look at. She doesn't include photos of the garment itself except for like the front page of the pattern. Everything else, any like image or graphic or anything like that she has, is actually like a little sketch that she drew herself, which is really cute and kind of whimsical. So I like that. That was definitely, it helped to make the pattern be less visually stimulating, which feels a little weird to say. I don't know why that feels weird to say, but that feels a little bit weird to say. But having a pattern, because I have also knit a few Jessie made patterns recently and have said like in my pattern reviews that there's just too much going on. There are too many words. It's a little bit too too much for me to look at with my specific brand of ADHD. So having this be a lot less visually stimulating kind of helps to focus a little bit more on what the pattern was telling me to do. And I didn't find myself skipping steps accidentally like I did in the Jessie Made Designs patterns. So I did really like that. And it was definitely, I would say that it's not a beginner pattern. Just because, you know, picking up stitches is intimidating, and doing lace can be intimidating, and a couple of the other techniques like can be intimidating. So I definitely wouldn't say it's a beginner pattern, but I would say maybe an advanced beginner or lower level intermediate knitter can definitely tackle this pattern and get a good finished object in it without getting too overwhelmed or anything like that. So what you need to know or be unafraid of, I'm going to stare at my notes while I say it so I don't forget. Obviously, knitting and purling. You need to know how to knit and purl if you're going to knit. You'll also need to be able to do short rows. You need to know how to make one left and make one right with knits. You also need to know how to make one left and make one right with purls. I don't love doing make ones on a purling side. That's why I have a hard time with the Vanilla is the New Black socks, which I think are visually very stunning and I love the way it fits. I just hate doing make one purls. You also need to be able to slip knit two together, do a yarn over. Obviously you need to know all of those things to be able to do lace work. And then the pattern itself does call for an Italian tubular 2x2 bind off on the edge here. You, of course, like most patterns, will do a rib of some sort on the bottom edging. And then to do the bind off, she wants you to do the fancier bind off, which looks much nicer and is a little bit stretchier. But, sorry, my throat feels kind of dry. I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee real quick. Okay, but I was binding off my back panel while on a plane. And so because I was on a plane, I was like, not doing the fancier one. I checked with her beforehand, so she was aware. So I just did a regular bind off, just a knit bind off. That was the easiest thing to do. And I personally think it still looks fine. If I can get it to, yeah, I mean, I think it still looks fine. Doesn't look fancy, but still looks fine. And then one other thing that I did do that was an adjustment in the lace panels on this side is I didn't feel like, and this was purely because I was lazy and I also didn't ask permission beforehand, so sorry, Devin. I didn't feel like picking up along the ribbing, so I didn't. So it's sort of a split hem look, but it's a very wide split hem. I don't mind it. I don't feel like it actually impacts the way it fits me at all. It's not super noticeable when you're wearing it. I might have a side view. If I have a side view of me wearing it, I'll insert the photo so you can see. But, you know, I was lazy and I'm still happy with the result. So do as I say, not as I do, unless you also want to be lazy and you don't think that this looks absolutely ridiculous. I'll hold it up again. With having the side panel not technically fully seamed together. One other thing that I did was I had, while I was working on this, before I picked up for the lace panels on the side, I had, I think 7 grams of the Silk Sari blend left over, and I wasn't super happy with the length when I had tried it on. And so I decided I was gonna go ahead and pick up, and then like when I laid it flat, it didn't, the front and the back didn't like mesh, they didn't line up very well. So I decided to go ahead and add like 1 inch of length on the front. And oh man, you can see it on camera still. So I picked up my stitches right here and ripped back. Could have done sweater surgery, didn't, ripped back and started knitting again and forgot to switch my needle size. So I knit 1 row on a 4mm, nope, on the 3.5mm US 4, realized it, went, I'm not reknitting that row again, switched over to a size 6. So I do have a little bit of a line here. I was hoping that it would come out with blocking. It did not. Maybe it'll come out with more aggressive blocking next time I wash it and block it. Maybe just as I wear it, it'll even out a little bit more. But it's not noticeable when I have it on my body. It's just noticeable when I hold it up. So whatever, is what it is. I don't think I have anything else that I wanted to add in other than my final grade of everything. So ultimately, I'm going with an A- for this. The only thing that is stopping me from giving it a full-on A is the yarn choice that the pattern calls for. Because again, going back to talking about the yarn choice and babies that spit up, is it realistic? It's just gonna depend on you and what you decide is realistic for your own personal life. For me, if I had been in the like very much spitting up phase, this would not have been realistic. I would not have been wearing this at all. Now that he's a little bit older, GI tract is a little bit more stable, still can't have dairy, that's okay. Not spitting up quite as much, then I will wear this while I'm breastfeeding him or holding him. The only other cons that I can really think of are, again, with the yarn choice, the recommended yarn is pricey. You can obviously get it for cheaper if you're buying from like a big box store, or you buy yarn on sale like I was able to, or things like that. But ultimately, like, you're going to be spent, if you're buying yarn for full price and you're making a size 7 like I did, and you're using the yardage like I did, you're gonna be spending around $125, $150 if you're gonna be doing the lace held double and you're just getting it from like a local yarn dyer for you or something like that. Could you save a couple of dollars by going to a mohair? Possibly. Depends on if they're your preferred person's blend of mohair costs a little bit less. So, obviously there's a little bit of give or take there depending on who you buy it from, but ultimately if you're buying full price, a nicer like silk blend, just straight silk, something like that, it's going to be more expensive. And babies are expensive, so while you're in the throes of buying diapers and wipes and doing laundry consistently and all of these things, do you really want to be spending that much money on yarn for a top? To each their own. But if I didn't have the yarn already purchased, if I didn't have most of the yarn already purchased, then I may not have been interested in test knitting this or knitting this at all, specifically for the purposes intended. If it was just like, oh, I really love this shirt, I'm gonna make it, then yeah, sure, I'd buy that. But if specifically I was like, ooh, this is pretty and it's great for breastfeeding, yes, I want to make it. I know that was kind of rambly, but ultimately my point is the yarn is pricey if you go for the specific recommended yarns. And then only other con, I know I already said that sentence, but I promise this time, only other con is that it is shorter than I'd like it to be, but that's not ultimately a con for the pattern itself unless you follow the pattern specifically, because you can always elongate a pattern. It's not difficult to do. I've done it in other tops. I just didn't for this one because one, it was a test knit, so I wanted to make sure I was making it to specification as much as I could, and two, I didn't want to buy more yarn. So, you know, I still have another skein because I actually had purchased 4. So I do still have another skein of the Madeline Tosh. I could always buy another skein of the Yarn Jam Silk Surrey blend. So I could always go back if I wanted to and add length, but I'm done knitting the project, so I really don't want to. And I've already determined how it will / can fit into my wardrobe. So, you know, it's the length it is. Should I revisit it in a future date? It's possible, but probably not. The pros to this pattern are a lot of what I've already said in this video, but it is easy to breastfeed in. I have tested it out. I did a trial run before recording this so that I could make sure I was speaking on that, since it is partially, you know, that's part of the whole appeal, is to have something that you can easily breastfeed in. It is very cute. It's very whimsical. It's very cottagecore, so to speak. I would love to be a cottagecore person, but I am not. So it's kind of nice to be able to add this to my wardrobe. It's just like a little touch of it here and there. And again, the pattern, it really is written very well. It's very easy to read and understand, and it's not visually overstimulating. It's, you know, I feel like basic has a negative connotation to it, but I don't mean it in any sort of negative sense in this specific instance. It's just like, this is a pattern. You are following the instructions. There's not anything taking your attention away by having anything anecdotal. Like, you know how when you get a recipe online from Pinterest or something, you have to scroll through the story about why the recipe is what the recipe is. Like, you don't have to do that with this pattern, and I appreciate that. It's just like you click the jump to recipe as you click jump to pattern, except you don't actually click that because you just jump right to it. Yeah, that's really all I have to say on this pattern. All I have to say, as it's been like probably close to 30 minutes talking about it at this point, but it is soft, it is squishy, it's probably warm. I haven't worn it that much because of summer, but it's soft, it's squishy. It is nice enough that I'm going to wear it over top of a black dress at a wedding this weekend. I will not be able to insert photos of that because I will have already uploaded this before the wedding, but if you head on over to my Instagram, I'll probably post photos there. And yeah, ultimately I'm very happy with how this turned out, and I can't wait to wear it and start to use it. So if you have made it this far in the episode, thank you so much for joining me and sticking around. If you're a returning viewer and you've subscribed, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If you've made it this far and you don't follow me, follow's not the right word, subscribe is the right word, and you don't subscribe, I'd really appreciate it if you did. It helps my little itty bitty channel grow, as well as liking and commenting. I did in the last episode do a giveaway of this skein of wool and vinyl yarn. I'm going to announce the giveaway in my September 1st episode, which will likely be a vlog, like knit with me as I travel episode. So stay tuned for that. And if you did want to go ahead and enter to, again, get this skein of yarn, go back and watch my previous episode. I'm going to close the giveaway probably August 29th or 30th, just so I can make sure I have enough time to edit and upload the podcast and have that giveaway announcement winner in there. But anyway, with all of that being said, I feel like I've already said that this episode, and if I have, oh well. But thank you again so much for joining me, and I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, evening, weekend, weekday, whatever this may be for you while you're watching it. Thanks, and until the next episode, bye!